I remember that day like a wound that never heals. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and coffee, a banal normalcy that clashed with the storm inside me. I sat at the table, hands trembling, staring at the mug I didn't even want to sip. "Are you seriously crying over this?" my sister asked, smirking from across the counter. Her words were light, casual, but each one felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. I, I just, my voice cracked before I could finish. I tried to explain, tried to make them see the chaos in my mind, the betrayal I spit been carrying. I feel like everything spits too much. Work, life, people I thought I could trust. My mother sighed, loud and sharp, the kind that slices the air and leaves you gasping. "Stop being so dramatic. Everyone struggles, dear. You stare overreacting." I froze. My stomach twisted. That word, dramatic, echoed like a verdict. Like they'd read my soul and laughed at the cracks. But I choked on my own words. "I feel alone and—" "Alone?" my sister interrupted, rolling her eyes. "You're never alone. You have us. Don't act like you're suffering." Her laugh was quiet, but it hit me like a crowd of jeering faces. I lowered my gaze, the tremor in my hands growing. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. "You don't understand," I whispered, almost to myself. "Oh, we understand perfectly," my mother said, voice icy now. "You just need to toughen up. Life is instead a therapy session." I felt my chest tighten. My throat burned. All the nights I'd cried silently, all the trust I'd placed in them, it felt like sand slipping through my fingers. Their faces, smiling masks over judgment, weren't comforting. They were shields hiding indifference. I tried to laugh it off, forcing a smile that tasted bitter. "Yeah, maybe I'm overreacting," I said, but the words felt like poison in my mouth. My sister leaned back, sipping her coffee, eyes still glinting with amusement. "See, that wasn't such so hard. Just admit you such you're being dramatic and move on." Move on. Just like that, as if my pain was a broken toy to be tossed aside. I clenched my fists under the table. My nails dug into my palms. They don't care. They never cared. That thought echoed, loud and undeniable. "Can't you at least pretend to listen?" I asked. My voice trembling with rage I couldn't fully express. Pretend. I wanted them to pretend to care, but even that was too much. My mother's sigh deepened. "I don't have time for theatrics. Go to your room, please." I stood, the chair scraping the floor like a scream. Every step to my room felt like walking through fire. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Once inside, I collapsed onto the bed, hands over my face. My heart pounded. My mind spun. Betrayal, not from a stranger, but from the people I thought were my sanctuary. I remembered the day I confided in them about my friend, how I'd been hurt, how I'd trusted someone completely only to be stabbed in the back. I had hoped for comfort, understanding, maybe even a hug. Instead, I got mockery, dismissal, a verdict of drama queen. I curled up, shaking. My tears soaked the pillow, silent witnesses to the rage building inside me. That night I realized something terrifying. My family, the people who were supposed to be my safe place, might never take me seriously. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the shadows of my room stretching long and cold. I thought about the mask they wore every day, the perfect family act they paraded like a trophy. That mask wasn't love. It was judgment. A seed of anger planted itself deep inside me, quiet but unyielding. I buried it for now. I smiled in front of them. I nodded and said the right words, pretended to move on. But underneath that forced calm, the truth throbbed, relentless. I would never forget. I would never forgive. Not easily. And someday the world would see the person behind the masked smile. For now, I let them win. Let them believe I was fragile. Let them believe I was broken. But I wasn't it. Not really. Not anymore. And that, I realized, was the most dangerous thing of all. I never expected betrayal to come from blood. Never thought the person I trusted most could weaponize my pain. But that day, it happened. "You won't believe what she told me," my cousin said, a smirk curling his lips. I froze mid-step, my hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. "You told me something personal. And well, everyone needs to know, right?" My heart stopped. No, 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 no. I could feel the blood drain from my face. "You what?" I whispered, voice shaking. He shrugged, completely unbothered. "Relax. It's stup's not a big deal, just a little family gossip. You know how they love drama. I could feel the room spin, my stomach lurched. The thing I'd trusted him with, the secret I had bared with trembling lips, the story that had made me vulnerable, was now on display. Exposed. Before I could react, the front door opened. My father Sep's booming voice filled the hallway. What Sep's this I hear? Complaints? Crying over nothing? I turned to him, panic rising. Dad? It's Stut's not nothing. It's nothing. Exactly. You always blow things out of proportion, he said, cutting me off, his tone sharp as a knife. His eyes didn't search mine with concern. They scanned me like I was an overdramatic child throwing a tantrum. I blinked. What? My father. My father, he wasn't shielding me, he was joining them. My cousin's smug face, my father's cold dismissal, the betrayal burned like acid. You're siding with him? I asked, voice barely more than a tremor. I stopped siding with reality, he said. Maybe if you learned to keep things in perspective, people wouldn't still have to gossip about you. I felt something inside me snap, rage sharp and hot, collided with hurt so deep it made me shiver. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I wanted to scream, to hit, to vanish. Anything to shake the betrayal from my chest. You don't get it, I shouted, surprising even myself. I trusted him. I trusted you. And you, both of you laugh at me. My cousin chuckled, leaning against the doorframe. Drama queen strikes again. Maybe it seps a family trait. I wanted to disappear into the floor, to escape the suffocating weight of their mockery, the whispers, the snickers, the sideways glances. They pierced me like shards of glass. Every word they said echoed in my head. Overreacting, drama queen, too sensitive. I sank into a chair, my chest heaving, tears welled, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet, not here. Rage needed a home, and I found it. I stared at my father, really looked at him for the first time in years. The man I had idolized, the one I thought would protect me, was gone, replaced by someone small, petty, who chose ridicule over love. I swallowed hard. Something cold settled in my stomach. Not despair, not helplessness. Power. A seed of revenge, sharp and purposeful, grew in the soil of my hurt. You think this breaks me? I said, voice low, trembling with fury. You think I shall crumble in front of you? My father raised an eyebrow, smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth. Seems like you already are. I forced a laugh, bitter and hollow. No, not yet, but watch me. The plan didn't exist yet, not fully, but I could feel it taking shape in the dark corners of my mind. Each whispered insult, each mocking glance, fueled it. I would not be seen as weak, not ever again. You shall see, I muttered under my breath. A promise more to myself than anyone else. Everything you think you know about me, you shall regret it. My cousin's smirk faltered for the first time. My father's eyes flickered, confusion flashing briefly. They didn't understand yet. They wouldn't understand until it was too late. I left the kitchen, silent now, a storm behind my calm facade. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. Rage had become discipline, hurt had become strategy, tears had become armor. In my room, I closed the door and sank to the floor. My fists dug into my knees. I replayed the scene, every cruel word, every betrayal. I let it fuel me, let it simmer like fire under ice. I thought of every moment I'd been dismissed, every laugh at my expense, every tear I'd cried alone. It was a long list, but for the first time I felt ready to turn it all around. Revenge wasn't just a thought anymore. It was a plan, buried beneath the hurt, sharpened by rage. I would show them, not with shouting, not with tears, but with precision, with control, with power. And when that day came, when they realized the person they thought they could mock was untouchable, the betrayal they inflicted on me would return tenfold. For now, I let the room be silent. Let the echoes of their laughter fade into the shadows, but I smiled to myself, small and cold. That smile carried a promise. I would never be weak again. And I would never forget. I learned to hide behind a polite smile. Outwardly, I seemed calm, even happy. People nodded, laughed, said, "You're handling this well." They didn't see the fractures beneath the surface. I sat in my therapist's office, fingers tracing the rim of my coffee cup. Silence stretched between us. Finally she spoke. You sir carrying a lot, she said softly. Have you told anyone else? I shook my head. No. They wouldn't said understand. They never have. Her eyes studied me. So you hold it all inside? I let out a bitter laugh. Inside set's the safest place. Outside, it sets chaos. That night, I pulled out my journal. Pen scratched the paper like a blade, carving out the rage, the humiliation, the endless whisper of betrayal. I wrote letters I would never send, each word a tally mark of pain. I remembered my sister's laughter, my mother's sigh, my father's dismissal, my cousin's smirk. The memories clawed at my mind. Uninvited, I closed my eyes and pictured the moments like frames in a film, each one replayed, sharper than the last. Why do you keep reliving it? My friend asked over the phone. Her voice was warm, steady, grounding. Because it matters, I said. Every glance, every word, they teach me something. If I forget, I repeat. You stare not broken, she said. You stir learning. I swallowed hard. Learning. I liked the word. It didn't feel weak. It felt dangerous, powerful. I started noticing patterns. The small betrayals, the whispers, the sideways glances, the jokes at my expense weren't random. They were deliberate. My family thrived on control, on manipulating perception. I had been blind. I traced each pattern in my journal, connecting the dots like a detective, where they laughed at me, where they dismissed me, where they undermined me. It all told a story, and for the first time I felt the weight of potential. You're planning something, my therapist said one day, her voice calm but piercing. I looked at her, hiding the edge. I sat observing, preparing, learning, that sets all. She nodded. Observation is powerful. But remember Dawn said let it consume you. I smiled thinly. I sep already been consumed. At night when the house was quiet, I replayed the scenes in my head, my father laughing at my vulnerability, my cousin boasting about my secrets, the hollow approval my family gave to each other while I crumbled silently. Each memory was a scar, each scar a lesson. I counted them, like tally marks on my soul. One for ridicule, one for betrayal, one for dismissal. Soon they weren't just scars, they were armor. I became invisible, blending in, nodding, smiling, while I catalogued their weaknesses. Every word I said was measured, every reaction controlled. They couldn't touch me, not now, not ever. I don't know how much longer I can pretend, I whispered into the darkness one night. You'll manage, my reflection in the mirror seemed to reply. You always do. I started talking to myself, rehearsing conversations, imagining their reactions. My anger stayed quiet, simmering under the surface. I didn't need to explode. I needed to wait, to learn, to strategize. Each day I watched. Each day I wrote. Each day I learned how fragile their control was, how predictable their cruelty could be. I was patient, calculating, calm, silent. I realized the power wasn't in confronting them immediately. Power came from understanding, from waiting, from letting them continue their performances while I gathered evidence, insight, leverage. My scars became my strength. My pain became my strategy. Every moment I'd been dismissed, every tear shed in secret, every laugh that had cut me to the bone, it all fed the plan growing quietly inside me. You sir not weak, my friend said again. You sir preparing. I nodded though she couldn't see it. Preparing, not for revenge yet, not fully, but for the reckoning to come. The day they would see the person behind the polite smile, behind the quiet, behind the scars. I closed my journal, the ink smudged from my fingers, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The ache was still there, but it no longer paralyzed me. It guided me. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't broken. And one day, when they looked at me again, they wouldn't see the girl who cried alone. They'd see the storm that had been waiting, silent, sharp, unstoppable. For now I smiled, polite, calm, hidden, but inside, the fire burned. And that fire would change everything. I learned quickly that power whispers. It doesn't shout. Don't you think you're overthinking? My aunt asked one afternoon, sipping her tea as if the world revolved around her. I smiled politely. Maybe, I said, but inside my mind raced, cataloging every slip, every hint, every fragment of gossip that floated through the house. She laughed. You said always so dramatic, you know. I nodded. letting the word roll over me like water. They didn't see it, but that word fueled me. Dramatic. Overreacting. Perfect camouflage. While they mocked, I observed. While they boasted, I listened. While they laughed, I plotted. I started collecting threads. A conversation overheard in the hallway, my cousin griping about debts, a careless boast about old mistakes, an old letter tucked in a drawer, hinting at a secret they thought was buried, small pieces, insignificant on their own, but together they became something. Evidence, leverage, power waiting to be claimed. "You're quiet today," my cousin said one evening, leaning against the doorway. I shrugged. "Just tired." His smirk was automatic. He didn't know I was noting the twitch in his eye, the way he hesitated before speaking, the way his pride masked insecurity. I filed it away. Every detail mattered. I tested myself. Patience was the hardest lesson. My pulse would spike. My hands would itch to expose them, to confront, to scream. But I practiced calm. Smiles, polite words, nods. The thrill of restraint was intoxicating. I learned the art of silence, the power in invisibility. One night, I caught my aunt on the phone. She laughed, a sharp, cruel sound, and I froze, straining to hear. "You know she suspects nothing, right?" she said. I felt a rush, equal parts fear and exhilaration. Suspects nothing. She had no idea that I heard, that I remembered, that I waited. I started to map their routines like a strategist studying a battlefield. Every habit, every prideful move, every weakness became a brushstroke in a portrait I was painting. I noted the way my father always left his office door open, how my cousin hid certain calls, how my aunt's laughter betrayed secrets she thought were safe. "You're too quiet," my aunt said again. A week later, eyeing me with suspicion. I laughed softly, a sound light enough to pass as amusement. "I just like observing." Her eyebrows arched, but she dismissed it. They always did, and that dismissal, that carelessness, was my advantage. I realized revenge wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about shouting or tears or exposing myself. It was about control. The subtle thrill of knowing more than they did, of planting seeds they could never see, seeds that would grow into consequences far beyond their imagining. I kept meticulous notes in my journal. Not letters, not confessions, just observations, patterns, weaknesses, contradictions. Their pride was the most fertile soil. Their trust in my silence was the rain that nourished it. "You start changing," my friend said over the phone one night. "You sound different." "I am," I whispered, letting the words linger. I supped in learning. I reveled in the artistry of it. Quiet actions, invisible maneuvers, a glance here, a question there, subtle shifts that went unnoticed but planted doubt, discomfort, unease. Every small victory was a spark, a thrill, a taste of the long game I was mastering. I watched my cousin bristle at my composure, my father grow uneasy at my sudden silence, my aunt frown at the way I noted her every move, and I did nothing, because power is in restraint, power is in patience, power is in the slow accumulation of advantage while they think they hold the upper hand. "You're learning too much," my aunt said once, voice laced with suspicion, as if she sensed the undercurrent she could never touch. I smiled. "Maybe I am," I said softly, letting the words float without commitment. Truth and lie, indistinguishable, that ambiguity became my weapon. Each day, I felt the thrill build, not the thrill of confrontation, not the thrill of revenge unleashed, the thrill of silent dominance, the understanding that I could move unseen, strike later, and change everything without lifting a hand yet. I reminded myself daily, revenge is not a moment, it's a strategy, it's a plan built on observation, patience, and meticulous collection of weaknesses. And I was meticulous. I was patient. I was learning to play a game they didn't even know existed. I began to feel the first stirrings of power inside me, a quiet heat that pulsed in my veins. I was no longer the frightened, dismissed girl they thought I was. I was invisible, yes, but invisible with intent. Silent, yes, but calculating. Weak? No. I was growing sharper with every passing day. "Do you feel it?" I asked myself one night, staring into the mirror. My eyes reflected calm, almost serenity, but inside I was on fire. And that fire was patient, waiting, planning, ready. The seeds were planted, and when they grew I would be ready to harvest. Not with noise, not with fury, but with precision. And when that day came, everything would change. I learned early that the smallest crack can shatter the strongest mask. "Did you hear about the bills this month?" I asked casually one evening, leaning against the kitchen counter. My mother looked up from her knitting, her brow knitting tighter than the yarn in her hands. "What bills?" she asked, voice taut. "Oh, nothing. Just, some things I noticed in the statements," I said, smiling lightly. "Maybe I set them reading too much into it." She frowned. "What do you mean?" I shrugged, as if it were nothing. "Maybe I am imagining things, but it seems like some expenses are off. Not that it sups a problem, of course." Her fingers trembled slightly over the needles. I saw it, a small, almost imperceptible twitch. But it was there, anxiety threading through her perfectly controlled demeanor. Later, my brother wandered past, muttering under his breath about some forgotten account, some missed payment. I raised an eyebrow innocently. "Everything okay?" He snapped his head toward me. "Yeah, fine. I don't know." I nodded sympathetically. "It's seps easy to miss things. Happens to everyone." And just like that, a seed of doubt had been planted. I smiled to myself behind the polite mask I wore. Watching their confusion bloom was almost artistic. "You say you're thinking too much," my mother said later that night, tossing a cushion onto the sofa with a frustrated sigh. "These things they serve probably nothing." I leaned back, hands folded, appearing calm. "Maybe," I said softly. "Or maybe they serve signs. You never know until you look closer." Her eyes darted away, lingering on the bills on the counter. I felt a thrill pulse through me. The mask was slipping, the cracks were forming. I tested their reactions carefully, a word here about a forgotten expense, a casual mention there about a past misjudgment of my cousin, each hint crafted, precise. Innocent, almost invisible. "You don't think he stets lying, do you?" my brother asked me one afternoon, pacing nervously, about the investment. I tilted my head. "I don't know. But if I were you, I set double check, just in case." His eyes widened. That slight tremor in his confidence made my chest tighten with anticipation. Each doubt, each pause was a victory without confrontation. My cousin, usually brimming with confidence, began to stumble over words in family conversations. I let a careless comment about a misplaced trust escape once, and the ripple spread. He paused, hesitated, glanced around nervously, then forced a laugh. The laugh didn't reach his eyes. Not anymore. I caught my mother fretting over minor details, once inconsequential, now magnified. Her hands shook as she straightened the silverware, her forehead creased with tension that hadn't existed before. "You're imagining things," she muttered to herself, though I knew she wasn't. The worry was real, and I had caused it. Quietly, invisibly, strategically. Each day I watched, each subtle hint, each whispered truth, each carefully placed observation chipped away at the pristine image they so desperately clung to. Their perfect facade, a shield they had polished for years, was cracking. "You so different," my brother said one night, voice low, almost fearful. "You notice everything now. Everything." I smiled faintly, calm and controlled. "I just pay attention," I said. The thrill of it, seeing the tide shift without a single raised voice, was intoxicating. I had learned to move unseen, to manipulate without detection, to influence without confrontation. One evening my mother came to me, wringing her hands. "I don't yet understand. How did this happen?" I leaned forward slightly, offering a sympathetic tilt of my head. "Sometimes things go unnoticed for a long time, or maybe we just don't want to see them." Her lips pressed together. She didn't accuse, didn't scream, but I could feel the tension radiating off her. The crack widened. And it wasn't just them. I noticed my cousin's gait change, subtle shifts in how he spoke, how he avoided eye contact during conversations. The confidence he wore like armor began to fray at the edges. I kept my own expression calm, polite, almost bored. The contrast made their reactions more potent. They never suspected me, and that, above all, was the sweetest part. "You sound too calm," my brother muttered once, rubbing his temple. "It seeps unsettling." I shrugged lightly. "Calm seps underrated," I said, voice soft, almost apologetic. "It helps to think clearly. You should try it sometime." And then I watched the small victories accumulate. Subtle manipulation, invisible control, seeds planted, cracks widened, Doubt grew, anxiety festered. And all the while, I smiled behind my mask. Patient, silent, knowing exactly how far I could push without detection. Revenge wasn't loud, it wasn't messy, it was subtle, artistic, deliberate, and the art of it was intoxicating. I realized I was ready. The stage was set, the players unaware, and when the time came, I would no longer need subtlety. The tide had turned, and I was in control. For now, I let the cracks grow. Let the masks slip. Let them feel the tremor of doubt I had unleashed. And soon, very soon, everything would change. I felt the shift long before they did. The storm wasn't in the sky, it was in me, and it was gathering strength. "You have everything in order?" my lawyer asked, voice crisp over the phone. "Yes," I said, keeping my tone calm. "Documents, witnesses, leverage, all ready." He paused. "You such sure you want to move forward?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I sept never been more sure, except as time they feel the consequences of their arrogance. I hung up and let the silence fill the room. My fingers traced the edge of my desk. Every insult, every scoff, every dramatic whispered behind my back, it all came flooding back. I remembered my father's dismissal, my mother's sighs, my cousin's smirks, and now they would feel the weight of those moments. I reached out to others they had wronged, people they thought I would never contact, former business partners, disgruntled employees, even distant relatives who had suffered quietly. Each conversation was careful, precise. I didn't boast. I didn't threaten. I simply asked questions, listened, took notes, built quiet alliances that would amplify the impact when the time came. "Are you sure about this?" my friend asked over coffee one morning, her voice low, worried. "I've never been more certain," I said, sipping slowly. "This isn't stet about anger anymore. It's stets about precision, strategy, justice." She looked at me, her eyes sharp, trying to find the girl they all thought she knew, the scared, dismissed girl. She wasn't there. "I stem proud of you," she said finally. "But careful, you stare walking a fine line." I nodded, almost thoughtfully. "I know that's why every move is measured, every word deliberate. The storm has to hit when they least expect it." At home, I watched my family from the periphery. Their laughter, their petty arguments, the little dances of pride and ego, they were blind to the network I was weaving behind the scenes. Each secret I uncovered, each financial inconsistency I documented, each minor betrayal I collected, it was another strand in the web. "You're up to something," my brother muttered one evening, eyeing me suspiciously. I smiled lightly, feigning innocence. "Just observing, like always." He frowned but let it drop. He didn't know the truth. None of them did, and that ignorance gave me power. Quiet, almost imperceptible power. I met with my lawyer again, walking through strategy after strategy. "I want this airtight," I said firmly. "No holes, no room for doubt. Every document, every witness, every piece of evidence must tell the story they tried to bury." He nodded. "You thought this through?" "I have," I said, leaning forward. "And I once hesitate when the moment comes. This is about more than revenge. It's about accountability, about making sure they understand what it feels like to be dismissed, to be mocked, to be underestimated." I remembered the nights I had cried alone, the hollow laughter echoing in my mind, the faces of the people who had been my sanctuary and had turned against me. That memory was fuel now, pure, cold fuel. I started compiling everything meticulously. Statements, old letters, financial records, eyewitness accounts, each file was a silent weapon, waiting for release. The thrill of control surged through me, quiet, subtle, intoxicating. "You've changed," my aunt said one afternoon, frowning as she glanced at me across the dining table. "You've different, quieter, watching too much." I sipped my tea calmly. "Maybe I am, but watching is how you learn." Her eyes flickered. The tiniest crack, I noticed. She didn't know I'd already anticipated her reactions, predicted her defensiveness, charted her vulnerabilities. Each observation added to the storm I was gathering. I contacted former associates of my family discreetly, asking questions that seemed casual, harmless. I listened more than I spoke. I noted patterns, weaknesses, points of tension. By the time I hung up, I had a mental map of leverage, a lattice of truths that would collapse their facade when pulled. "Are you ready for what comes next?" my friend asked gently. I leaned back, letting my fingers trace the edge of my journal. The storm is ready. Isep turned my pain into precision, my grief into strategy, my anger into power. They will feel it, all of it. I imagined the moment vividly, faces pale, voices faltering, eyes widening as the truth I had quietly assembled hit them all at once. The arrogance, the pride, the casual cruelty, they would be powerless to defend themselves. And I would stand calm, collected, invisible no longer. Each day the storm grew. My planning meticulous, my alliances quiet but solid, my network ready. I was patient, calculated. I didn't need to strike yet. The power was in the preparation, in the anticipation, in the quiet satisfaction of knowing the tide was turning. I whispered to myself in the quiet hours of night, fingers tracing the edge of the ledger, the stack of files, the carefully labeled evidence. Soon, I said. Soon they still understand, and it will be undeniable. The fear was no longer mine. It belonged to them. Every insult, every dismissal, every mocking word, they had built this moment unknowingly, and I had built my strategy upon it, silent and unyielding. I closed the files, taking a deep breath, the calm before the storm. I had transformed every ounce of emotion into power, every scar into armor, every tear into a weapon. And when the storm hit, they would remember exactly who they had underestimated. The moment came quietly. I didn't announce it. I didn't build it up. I just acted. Everyone, can I have your attention? I said, voice steady, calm, too deliberate. My mother looked up from her magazine, brows knitting. What is it? I held up the folder, the neat stack of documents, photos and messages I had spent months collecting. My cousin's eyes flicked to me, then quickly away. He knew. Somehow he knew. Do you recognize these? I asked softly, letting the words linger. The room went silent. He swallowed. I didn't know what. I cut him off gently. Don says to lie. Every word you told me in confidence, every promise you broke, every secret you spilled, everything is here. My mother Sep's hand flew to her mouth. This isn't just possible. I let a pause hang, long enough for tension to stretch, to choke the room. You called me dramatic, I said, my voice calm but cutting. You laughed at my pain, and you, I looked at my cousin, betrayed me when I trusted you the most. His face went pale. My mother's eyes darted around, searching for an excuse, a defense, a lifeline. None came. You knew I would never forgive a betrayal like this, I continued, flipping through the documents slowly, each image, each message, each note, an undeniable trail. And yet you thought your lies would remain buried. My cousin stammered. I didn't save it, I said softly, almost pityingly. The evidence speaks louder than excuses. My mother Sep's hands trembled. I then know it would. You didn't know? I repeated, voice barely above a whisper. You mean you didn't care? Her lips pressed together. No answer. You called me dramatic for saying I felt overwhelmed, I said, keeping my gaze sharp. You dismissed my struggles, my pain, my truth, and now you see what happens when your judgment blinds you. The room was heavy with shock. My father, silent in the corner, had no words. My brother's eyes widened in disbelief. My cousin shrank into his chair, face pale, lips moving silently. You see, I said, pacing slowly, letting each step echo in my mind. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg for understanding. I didn't need to cry. All I needed was this. I held the folder higher, letting the weight of truth fill the space. The truth. My mother Sep's voice cracked. You judged me for years, I said, soft but relentless. And now it's your turn to feel the weight of your arrogance. The laughter you shared at my expense. The dismissals. The mocking, it's here, all here. My cousin's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, he muttered, barely audible. Too little, too late, I said quietly, letting the words sink. The first strike had landed. The room was stunned, fractured by truth. They could no longer rely on their perfect facade. The masks they wore so carefully were slipping. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to cry. I let the evidence do the work. Every gasp, every tremble, every sideways glance. It was my victory. Silent, undeniable, precise. You You made me look foolish, my mother whispered, almost to herself, eyes glistening. You underestimated me, I corrected gently. That was your first mistake. My cousin Sep's apology was broken, desperate. I didn't Sep mean. I know, I said, but meaning doesn't stet undo betrayal. It doesn't stet erase the years you mocked me. I let the silence hang, let the weight of their realization settle like a stone in the pit of their stomachs. The thrill of vindication was sharp, almost dizzying. I had planned carefully, I had waited patiently, and now the first wave had hit. Their confidence was shaken, their arrogance cracked, and I was at the center, calm, unwavering, controlled. My mother Sep's eyes met mine, a mix of fear and disbelief. I never thought. You never thought I would have the strength, I said softly. Or the patience. I closed the folder gently, the soft click echoing like a final note. This is only the beginning, I whispered. The first strike, the first taste, and there sticks much more to come. I left them in silence, letting the shock linger, letting the humiliation settle. For the first time, they understood the power of their own misjudgment. The first wave of justice had landed, and it was undeniable. I stood calm in the center of the storm I had created, feeling the sweet, intoxicating taste of vindication. Their world, carefully curated, was crumbling, and I was the quiet force dismantling it, piece by piece, without raising my voice, without shedding a tear. The first strike was mine, the reckoning had begun. And the storm? The storm was far from over. The air in the room felt heavier than ever. Everyone's eyes flicked toward me, sharp with anticipation, suspicion, maybe even fear. I took a deep breath. This was it, the crescendo. I have something to show you, I said, voice steady, but carrying the weight of months of planning. The folder in my hands had grown thicker, heavier with every secret, every betrayal, every lie I had uncovered. My mother's fingers trembled over her cup. What is it now? She asked, trying to sound casual. I opened the folder slowly, deliberately. It stops everything, I said softly. Everything you thought was hidden. Every word, every action, every moment you believed would never see the light. My cousin F's eyes darted nervously. You how? Shush, I said, holding up a hand. Let me speak. For once, let truth do the talking. I started with the financial discrepancies. The hush that fell over the room was almost physical. My mother's hands clutched at her chair, my brother's jaw tightened, and my father leaned back, stunned into silence. You called me dramatic, I said, flipping to the next page. You mocked my struggles, my pain, my honesty, and yet here you are, faces pale, voices caught, pride crumbling. Do you see it now? My cousin stammered. I didn't think you. Didn't think I set uncover it? I interrupted, soft but sharp. You underestimated me, again, just like everyone else. I moved through the evidence methodically. Emails, messages, bank records, photographs, every lie, every betrayal, every whispered secret, every dismissed tear, laid bare before them. My mother Sep's voice trembled. I didn't know it had gotten this far. No, I said quietly. You knew, you ignored it, you laughed at it, you called me dramatic. And now, you see what happens when arrogance blinds you. The room had gone still, whispers had died. Even my father, usually quick with a dismissive comment, said nothing. His eyes were wide, calculating, finally realizing the scope of what he had allowed. You, my cousin whispered, voice tight. You betrayed me, I said, cutting him off. Every promise, every confidence you broke, it steps all here, and it steps undeniable. No excuses, no lies, no theatrics. I paused, letting the weight of the folder hang between us. Their carefully curated world, the perfect image of a flawless family, was crumbling. Pride, arrogance, judgment, they all shattered silently under the weight of truth. You called me overreacting, I continued, voice soft but relentless. You ridiculed my feelings, my struggles. And now, I let the pause linger, letting the silence press against them. Now you understand what it feels like to be dismissed, mocked, and underestimated. My brother's hands shook, gripping the edge of the table. I didn't think it was like this, he muttered, almost to himself. It is, I said quietly. And it has been for a long time. You Seb all built your lives on judgments, secrets, and half-truths. I just held a mirror up. I could see the disbelief flicker across their faces. My mother Sep's eyes were wet, but not from tears. At least, not yet. My cousin Sep's voice was barely audible. He. Save it, I said. Calm. Precise. Words one set undo what Sep's been done. Actions speak louder, and now your actions are exposed, undeniable, and irreversible. I laid the folder on the table, spreading the evidence like a deck of cards stacked against them. Every gasp, every hesitant glance, every swallowed apology was a strike without violence. Justice, quiet and perfect, had arrived. Yusbev changed, my mother said finally, voice breaking. Yusbev stronger than I ever imagined. I had to be, I said softly, because no one else would stand up for me, no one else would care enough to act. And now, I let my eyes sweep over them. Now you understand the cost of your cruelty. The room was heavy with shame, disbelief, and a muted kind of fear. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell or cry. I let them feel it, the full weight of their choices. Every mocking laugh, every dismissal, every casual word that cut me down, every glance that minimized me, it was all coming home. You vindictive, my cousin whispered, voice trembling. No, I said, shaking my head slowly, not vindictive, just patient, observant, strategic. Justice is in sicked chaos. It septs undeniable, and it septs yours to feel now. I closed the folder with a soft click. The sound was final. Irrevocable, the first strike had landed. The exposure was complete. The family that had mocked me, dismissed me, and called me dramatic was finally served the truth. A silence settled over the room, thick and suffocating. Their pride, their arrogance, their certainty, it all lay in ruins, and I, calm, resolute, unwavering, stood at the center of it. I felt the power, yes, but more than that I felt catharsis. Rage transformed into clarity. Pain transformed into proof. Every insult, every sneer, every moment of being belittled had led to this, and it was perfect. You, my mother said again, voice shaking, Yusef made us face ourselves. Yes, I said softly. And maybe now you still understand. Maybe now you still see the cost of underestimating someone you dismissed as the dramatic. The room remained quiet. The storm had passed, leaving devastation in its wake, and I stood there resolute, knowing the full reckoning had begun, and the sweetest part was, it was just. The room was quiet, not the tense, expectant silence from before, but a hollow silence. The kind that hangs heavy when the consequences finally land. My mother Sep's hands trembled as she approached. I never realized, she whispered, voice cracking. I didn't know how much I hurt you. I looked at her, calm, unwavering. The rage that had fueled months of planning was still there, but now it was tempered by clarity. You called me dramatic, I said softly. You laughed at my struggles. You dismissed me for years. She flinched at the words, eyes brimming with shame. I know. I see it now. You see it now, I repeated, letting the phrase linger, but seeing does instead erase the past. It does instead undo the years of judgment. My cousin shuffled beside her, face pale. I betrayed you. I didn't think it would matter this much, he murmured, voice small, almost childlike. It mattered, I said, voice steady. It always mattered. The trust you broke, the secrets you spilled, they were mine, and you used them as if they meant nothing. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Truly I didn't realize. You didn't realize, I echoed, a shadow of the voice I once been, the voice that had been silenced, mocked, dismissed. Now it held weight, presence, finality. You underestimated me. Again, and now you understand the consequences. My mother Sep's eyes filled with tears. We were blind. We thought we were protecting you, helping you. You were protecting yourselves, I said quietly, letting the words settle. Not me. You protected your pride, your image, your ego, and in doing so, you lost sight of humanity, of kindness, of empathy, of me. There was a pause. The weight of months, years, all of it pressed into the room. Their shame was palpable, a living thing, twisting and folding into the air between us. I never meant to, my cousin started again. You didn't mean to, I said soft now. And yet you did. You can apologize until the end of time, but the harm was done. The reckoning was inevitable. My mother lowered her head. I see that now. I see what we steve done. And now you feel it, I said. That seps the balance. That seps the cost of arrogance, of dismissiveness, of cruelty disguised as concern. I felt a strange clarity, a release. Revenge had never been about endless punishment. It wasn't about hurting them until they begged for mercy. It was never about power over them. It was power reclaimed for myself. You were both pillars of judgment, I said, voice calm, cutting through the tension. And now, those pillars are hollow. The foundation you built your certainty on is cracked. But I paused, letting the sentence linger. I am standing, whole unbroken, in control. My cousin Sep's shoulders slumped. I done set deserve. You don't set, I said softly. And that Sep's the point. This isn't Sep's about what you deserve. This is about what I need, and what I needed was truth. Observation, patience, understanding. And now, justice, quiet, undeniable, inevitable. My mother Sep's lips quivered. I never imagined you could. I imagined it, I interrupted gently. I imagined the day I could reclaim my voice, my strength, my dignity, and it Sep's here. I am here, and I am free of your judgment. They hung their heads. Apologies and explanations fell from their lips in broken, stammering phrases. But I heard only what I needed, the acknowledgement, the recognition, the humility that only comes when pride shatters. I could have shouted. I could have demanded apologies. I could have let the satisfaction of their fear flood me. But I didn't. That wasn't the victory I sought. My victory was composure, dignity, quiet strength. My victory was the knowledge that I had moved through betrayal, observation, planning, and action, and emerged intact, unbroken, powerful. You understand now, I said softly, letting my gaze settle on both of them. And perhaps that is enough. My mother's shoulders shook, silent tears falling. My cousin's eyes met mine for a brief moment, wide with regret and shame. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. Revenge is never just about hurting others. It's about reclaiming yourself, taking the pieces of your life that were dismissed, and proving their resilience, their integrity, their power. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from my body. The storm had passed, their reckoning had been delivered, and I was whole. I had watched pride crumble, arrogance falter, fear and regret take root, but I hadn't been cruel. I hadn't been loud. I had been precise, measured, and unwavering. And that was my victory, silent, complete, true. I looked at them one last time, hollowed by regret, stripped of judgment, and yet undeniably human. And I smiled, not at their suffering, but at my own resilience. The reckoning was done. The family that had mocked me, dismissed me, and belittled my struggles had finally faced the weight of their actions. And I had reclaimed myself. The silence after the storm was different this time. Not tense, not heavy, just quiet. Clean. I breathed in, slow, deliberate. Finally I could feel it. The calm after chaos, the clarity after every betrayal, every plan, every strike. I walked through my apartment, sunlight spilling across the floor. Each step echoed softly, but inside me, there was no echo of doubt, no trembling of fear. I was solid.
Whole.
Is it really over? I whispered to myself, letting the words roll gently in the quiet. Yes, I answered back, almost smiling. It steps over. I thought of my family, their faces pale, their voices broken, their pride shattered. For a moment the satisfaction flickered, sweet and sharp, but it was fleeting. I no longer needed it. Their lesson had landed. The karma had done its work. The scars remained, yes, each one a memory of laughter, dismissal, betrayal, but they were mine now, not theirs. They reminded me not of weakness, but of endurance, of strategy, of patience, of survival. I sat at my desk, journal open, pen in hand. "Iceps built this," I said softly. Not in spite of them, but because of everything they thought would break me. The voice on the page felt steady, confident, grounded. I had reconstructed my life with careful boundaries, respect for myself, and an understanding that my power wasn't in controlling others. It was in mastering me. Sometimes I caught whispers of them. A comment from a cousin, a glance from my mother in passing. But it no longer pricked me. no longer sank into my chest. I was untouchable because I no longer gave them the power. I survived, I said aloud. I thrived. I rewrote my story, on my own terms. I thought of the girl they had called dramatic, the one who trembled at ridicule, who cried at dismissal, who begged to be heard. She was still there, somewhere deep inside me, but she had grown. She had learned. She had mastered patience and strategy, transforming her vulnerability into strength. My phone buzzed, a message from a friend. Lunch tomorrow. You've been quiet. I smiled. Yes, lunch, I whispered. A small, deliberate act of choice. Connection. Life. Freedom. I glanced at the calendar on the wall. Projects lined up, appointments, travel plans. My life was mine now. Carefully curated, thoughtfully planned, yet full of possibility. The chaos of their judgment and hypocrisy no longer dictated my schedule, my energy, or my emotions. I am free, I said aloud, letting it settle in the air, free from the past, free from their voices, free from the shadows of betrayal. I thought back to every subtle strike I had delivered. The exposure, the silent victories, the strategies executed without theatrics. They had been lessons for me as much as punishments for them. Every careful plan had taught me clarity, precision, self-reliance. The ultimate revenge wasn't in their suffering, it was in my liberation. A breeze came through the open window, carrying sunlight and the faint scent of jasmine. I breathed it in, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I didn't worry about what they thought. I didn't weigh their judgment. I only felt the warmth, the clarity, the strength. I whispered to myself, almost as a promise, I will never let anyone diminish me again. Not now, not ever. The girl who had been silenced was no longer small. She was a force measured, patient, and unstoppable. I had transformed pain into power, strategy into liberation, and patience into proof that the person who had been underestimated, the one they had mocked and dismissed, could rise above it all. I walked to the mirror, looking at my reflection. I studied my eyes, steady, unflinching, clear. The face looking back at me was no longer the timid, trembling child. It was a woman who had survived every storm, mastered every challenge, and emerged unbroken. You've done it, I whispered to her reflection. You've taken everything that tried to break you and turned it into armor. And in that quiet moment, I understood the full truth of my journey. Revenge had never been about them. It had always been about me, about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, my life, about rising from the ashes stronger, wiser, and free. I closed my eyes. I felt peace, solid, unshakable, and deeply earned. The girl they called dramatic? She was no longer a target. She was the author of her own life. She was victorious. She was whole. She was unstoppable. And finally she smiled,